Jump off that exhausting hamster wheel and into balanced living with Dr. Marissa.
Promise you joy in the mystery.
Dr. Marissa, also known as the Asian Oprah. Her mission, to be a beneficial presence on the planet. Her purpose, to be your personal advocate to live, laugh, love, learn. Her life motto, don't die wondering. Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.
And welcome. You are tuned into Take My Advice. I'm not using it. Get balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, NBC News Radio Channel, KCAA, AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, and streaming everywhere. iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, Amazon Music, Audible, and more. Because I want to splatter as much hope and happiness on you and balance out all the bad news with some good news. You can have bad news anytime you want. You just have to do this in the morning. That's scrolling. Get your mind out of the gutter. It takes some work to find good stories, but you keep it here. You're always going to hear something from #positively opinionated Dr. Marissa. And today is October the 28th. And what's so special about today? Well, I'm going to tell you. It is International Animation Day. So that gives you permission to go and animate. No, just kidding. There's lots of really great animated movies out there. So enjoy that and celebrate animation. As well as it is National First Responders Day. And let's just take a breath right now and release gratitude and appreciation for first responders in all places. I think first responder became a term when 9/11 happened and we began to see those images of the first responders, many of whom lost their lives as they went in to try to help those who were in the rubble. And first responding is not only limited, obviously, to 9/11. It's, I think the #silver lining of tragedy is giving appreciation to all those who risk their own lives to go there. Firemen, emergency tech, doctors, during COVID, especially nurses who put their own lives on the line to help us. So let's give some appreciation to those who help us on this October 28th, National Responders Day. And it is also National Internal Medicine Day. So if you know a doctor who practices internal medicine, you can impress them by calling them and wishing them a happy National Internal Medicine Day. And now, drum roll, please, the national holiday you've all been waiting for. And this is part of the deliciousness of life. It is National Chocolate Day. So if you're looking for permission to have chocolate all day, here it is. You heard it here on Take My Advice. I'm not using it. Get balanced with Dr. Marissa. Get chocolate with Dr. Marissa. That is today. And that's a wonderful reason to celebrate. I like chocolate. I don't know about you. I know chocolate is like a good and bad word for a lot of people. So I thought I would look it up. Why is chocolate so addictive? It says, thanks to Wikipedia, under chocoholic, the natural brain chemical enkephalin is heightened when chocolate is consumed. Enkephalin triggers opioid receptors similar to those triggered by heroin and morphine use. See, this is what you get when you are curious. This is what you get when it's National Chocolate Day. This chemical leads the brain to desire more after chocolate is initially consumed, which can lead to addiction. Well, if you ever wondered why you just feel so good after chocolate, now you know why. It is definitely a safer way to feel good than morphine and heroin. So we'll take the chocolate, and happy National Chocolate Day to you. All right. So you know that I like to balance out the bad news with the good news. And even though sometimes I bring things up like I am today, that is bad news, there's a reason. And that reason is when we become aware of things that aren't working, then we can raise our vibration to the level of solution to find out ways to remedy what is the issue. And today's story is definitely in that category. I was called to cover a news story in Beverly Hills on racial profiling. And here's the story.
And this is Dr. Marissa reporting live. It's kind of surreal. I'm on the streets of Beverly Hills on Rodeo Drive, where I just came from a press conference that I'm going to show you some clips from of racial profiling while driving through Beverly Hills while black. And it's not a pretty story. The good news is we do have a legal process to try to call attention to places that need to be changed, where there's temporary darkness. So I thought I would walk a little further from the conference and visit Rodeo Drive. It's been a long time since I've been here, and I do enjoy designer and Beverly Hills, so I hope they get their stuff together. Yes, I'm known as the most materialistic spiritual person you'll meet. Anyways, enjoy the clips, and looking for balance, and looking to right the wrongs, and looking to shine light in areas of temporary darkness, because discrimination and racism have no place in Beverly Hills or anywhere. This is Dr. Marissa reporting live. Peace in, peace out, world peace through inner peace.
Racism and discrimination are pretty much one and the same. If you tolerate within a police department discrimination against someone because they're black or brown or female or gay, that gets put out on the streets. And then motorists get pulled over and profiled and arrested for no good reason and handcuffed when they should not be. A white person, if I was 3 inches over the limit line, I wouldn't even be pulled over. I wouldn't have been followed by the police because as a white motorist, I'm not suspicious. As black motorists, my clients were. And that's just not right. And that's what we're all about.
And we're not going to let it go. We need real leadership to step up front and say, we won't condone this, we won't be complicit in this, and we won't look away from this, and we won't sweep it under the rug. Black lives matter. Lakeisha and Joseph, their lives matter. Putting them in jail, putting them in handcuffs is humiliating for being 3 inches across the stop bar. It does become personal, because you think of your wife, your mother, your daughter, because they're no different from Lakeisha. And if it can happen to Lakeisha, then it can happen to any of them. And so it's personal to black and brown people. I just hope that it will become personal to our white brothers and sisters too.
Yeah, it is personal to the white brothers and sisters also, Ben, because everyone should be treated the same. Why is it that a black person gets handcuffed for a traffic violation 3 inches over the limit line and a white person isn't? There's no justification for that. There's no excuse for that. and we're not going to tolerate that. That's why we have this case. No more racial profiling.
No more.
So I don't know if you're as surprised as I am to find out this is not something that happened 10 years ago or 15 years ago. This was now. A couple is driving in the daytime in Beverly Hills and is cited for crossing the white line by some inches. The woman is handcuffed out of the car. Car is searched. Her boyfriend is taken and put in jail for 3 days, no charges. So obviously there's a problem here. The only crime is black while driving, as the lawyer said. So yeah, because of that, I thought it would be time again. And I know I've played her interview before, but it's golden. And for those of you who missed my live interview with Jane Elliot, she is my number one go-to diversity educator. She started very early. Those of you who have not watched the YouTube Brown Eye, Blue Eye, Class Divided, her classroom experience in Iowa as a teacher, please go to YouTube and watch it. It's free. And it's so illuminating and disturbing how quickly discrimination and prejudice is taught and then picked up by kids. And so you can understand why Beverly Hills may, under the guise of safe streets, just be an undercover or broad daylight way to promote racial profiling. So we'll keep you informed as this case develops. I'm not sure they're going to be able to come on and talk to me about it, but I will update you because I was definitely shocked and perplexed at how this could be happening. But apparently it happens all the time. So I wanted to bring Jane Elliot back because she's the best educator of how we teach racism and prejudice in the schools, in our homes. And she is a white woman who absolutely has taken her life's work to try to help us be valuing of diversity. That's when we come back, my spotlight interview with Jane Elliot here on Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, NBC News Radio, the station that leaves no listener behind.
Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.
And we're back. You're tuned into Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, NBC News Radio, CNBC News Radio, KCAA, AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, and streaming everywhere to over 100 nations, streaming as well as you can watch and listen on my free subscribe YouTube channel. Thank you. I think I've doubled my subscriptions since I went on the morning show and promoted here. And so I'm catching you on AM, FM, and the numbers are really good. And I'm grateful. We have a lot of people, hundreds of thousands of people tuning in now in the Southern California area, in their cars, on the way to work, and of course, on demand in all of my special platforms. But please do free subscribe on my YouTube channel, because when you do, you'll get an alert when a new show drops every weekday morning at 8 a.m. Now we return to an amazing interview with an amazing woman who's in her 80s, still continuing to preach the gospel of valuing diversity. She understands how racism is related to white privilege. She understands how our country has gotten to this point where it is. And she was on Jimmy Fallon last year, as well as Jada Pinkett Smith's Red Table Talk. So I was really grateful to get her live in studio. So as we continue to listen and learn how we got to be so racist, and more important, how we change that. Enjoy.
I have Jane Elliot, internationally known teacher, lecturer, diversity trainer, and recipient of the National Mental Health Association Award for Excellence in Education. She exposes prejudice and bigotry for what it is, an irrational class system based on purely arbitrary factors. And if you think this does not apply to you, you're in for a rude awakening and a nice awakening today on the show. She's been on Oprah, Jimmy Fallon, a month ago, Jada Pinkett Smith's Red Table Talk, and I'm honored now to welcome her to the Asian Oprah stage. Jane Elliot, you are a hero to me. I met you probably 20 years ago with your Class Divided Frontline PBS show that was life-changing for me as a diversity consultant. I used the clip, the brown-eyed, blue-eyed, the collars, and it really is a landmark, life-changing experiment that you did to teach children about racism. So as painful as it might be to go back, if people who don't know your 86-year young history of talking about this amazing, important topic, just tell us why have you spent a lifetime trying to eradicate racism?
Well, I haven't spent a lifetime trying to do that. What I've spent a lifetime doing is trying to stay alive. Number two, you need to know that I didn't do an experiment with my children. People like to use the word experiment because it sort of puts a lie to everything I did. And when you do an experiment, you're trying to lose something from your subject. You learn something from your subject. I wasn't trying to learn something from those kids. I was trying to teach them something. What I did was what Adolf Hitler did. And if you listen very carefully, you'll realize that what I did in my classroom and what Adolf Hitler did from 1933 to 1945 is exactly what is happening in the United States of America right now. And you need to be aware of that. And most people aren't. They don't see it that way. That they don't remember the Hitler years the way I do. The day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, and I don't like to talk about that because it makes me sick to my stomach, because I remember how it felt when I found out that he'd been shot. After I found out that he had been shot, we were learning the Indian unit at that time. And the next morning, we were supposed to learn the Sioux Indian prayer that says, "Oh, Great Spirit, keep me from ever judging a man until I've walked a mile in his moccasins." I decided, while I was watching the brilliant, the erudite, the sophisticated people, members of the press that night, members of the reporters, asking questions of members of the leaders of the Black community, things like, when our leader was killed, his widow held us together. Who's going to keep your people in line? I found that an absolutely insensitive and unacceptable question, because JFK wasn't the leader only of white folks. He was the leader of all of us. And yes, his young widow kept us in line, but that didn't mean it was because we were so civilized. It was because it was a horrible thing to kill a white man. And he also said to them, "What are your people going to do? What are your people going to do?" You see, I thought that Black people were my people. And it really made me angry that he would put that kind of thought in my head or the heads of anybody else listening to him. So I changed the channel. And there was another one of our famous commentators, and he said to three leaders of the Black community, "Don't you Negroes think you should feel sympathy for us white people because we can't feel the anger at this killing that you Negroes can?" And at that point, I rolled up the teepee that I was ironing in preparation for putting it up in my classroom the next day. I threw it into the closet. I shut the door on it. And I decided at that moment that not only was I going to teach my children the Sioux Indian prayer that says, "Oh, Great Spirit, keep me from ever judging a man until I've walked a mile in his moccasins," I was not only going to teach them that, I was going to arrange to have it answered for them. Because I decided at that moment that the next morning I would separate my students according to the color of the eyes, because that's one of the ways Hitler decided who went into the gas chamber. If you had a good German name, but you had brown eyes, they thought you might be a Jewish person who was trying to pass. And so they threw you into the gas chamber. I didn't invent this exercise. I learned it from watching what happened in Germany and all over Europe from the time I was born in 1933 until the end of the Second World War in 1945. I'm not talking out of my head here. I'm talking about what I remembered. I decided that the next morning, because I'm blue-eyed and most of the students are blue-eyed in that classroom, I would put blue-eyed people on the bottom because I didn't want the power structure to be with the out group. So I put with the in group. So I put the blue-eyed people on the bottom, the brown-eyed people on the top. I didn't know how this exercise would work. If I had known how it would work, I wouldn't have said the prayer that I said that night and every night. I said, "Oh Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Oh Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Oh my God." And the next morning I found out that I had created something that was going to give me nothing but peace for a very long time. Because I went into my classroom the next day, and Stephen Armstrong, the first little third grade student, came in and said, "Hey, Elliot, they shot that king last night. Why'd they shoot that king?" I said, "We're going to talk about that, Stephen." So after we had done the things you have to do first thing in the morning, first we said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag with the words "under God" in it, which do not belong there. We turn that Pledge of Allegiance into a prayer. We're supposed to have separation of church and state. We aren't supposed to pray in school, but we put those, Dwight Eisenhower, some congressmen were lobbied, and they lobbied Dwight Eisenhower to get those words added to the pledge. They don't belong there. And when Colin Kaepernick refused to stand for the pledge, he was reacting to that and to the last lines of the Star Spangled Banner, which says, "Oh, say does that Star Spangled Banner yet wave, or the land of the free and the home of the brave." And he knew who the free were, and he knew who the brave are in this country. After we said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, then we sang "God Bless America." So we broke the laws twice, according to the Constitution. And then we started to talk about the killing of Martin Luther King Jr. And I asked those kids what they knew about Black people, because none of these kids had ever been in the presence of a person of color. And those kids knew every negative stereotype I have ever heard about Black people, and some that I never heard of. And I finally said, "Look, how do you kids know these things are true?" And almost in a chorus, they said, "Because my dad said so." Fathers, and if you're men who are going to be fathers someday, be careful of what you say around your children, because they'll come to school to a person like me, and they'll repeat those remarks, and I'll know something about you that you don't want me to know, which is that you're a blatant, ignorant racist. Nobody but a blatant, ignorant racist would say the kinds of things that those good white Christian people were saying to their children at home over the dinner table. And we have to put a stop to this. I was shocked at what I learned that day. Blue-eyed people were on the bottom. I told the blue-eyed people to put their chairs, there's desks in the back of the room. Brown-eyed people are going to be in the front of the room. And I said, here's the way it is. Blue-eyed people aren't as smart as brown-eyed people. They aren't as clean as brown-eyed people. They aren't as civilized as brown-eyed people. You give blue-eyed people something nice, and what do with it? They said, they tear it up. They don't know any better. They don't take good care of things. And at that point, little brown-eyed Debbie sitting in the front row in that classroom looked up at me and said, "How come you're the teacher here if you got them blue eyes?" And I thought, oh my God, there it is. There it is. This 9-year-old child now feels free and confident to challenge me, as even though I'm her teacher and 24 years older than she is, she has the power now to challenge me because she has the right color eyes and I don't.
Wow. And every time I could listen to her, because every time I hear something different, and every time it's the understanding as a person of color that sometimes, I've definitely changed from the way I used to look at even how this country that I made a choice to become a citizen of. I used to have a lot more reverence for first families and for, the name blue blood Americans, until I saw 13th, until I educated myself with Jane Elliot and understood that a lot of the wealth in this country has been built on the backs of people who were dragged here from other countries who didn't want to be here, and they worked for nothing. and they worked and were discriminated against and are still discriminated against even up until this month with this case of racial profiling in the car that I went to Beverly Hills, which sparked this particular show, Spotlight on Jane Elliott. We'll come back with some more when we return on Take My Advice. I'm Not Using It. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, the station that leaves no listener behind.
Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.
And we're back. You're tuned into Take My Advice. I'm Not Using It. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, and streaming everywhere. iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and more. Spreaker. I can't go down the whole list because I did pretty good, actually. I used to stumble after the third one. I think I've got 6 down under my belt. But the bottom line is you can pretty much get me anywhere and everywhere. Just Google Dr. Marissa. I also am a guest on other shows, so please join me on my social media as I announce those. I'm Doc Balance on Instagram and Dr. Marissa everywhere else. Let's see. And Dr. Marissa everywhere else, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and lots of different pages on Facebook and even on TikTok. But don't tell my daughters, it's Dr. Marissa Happy 88 there. All right. So stay in touch with me. Also, if you want some happy tips, you all know that I preach the gospel of happy. I want you to be happier. You get a free happy tip sheet if you go and contact me at my virtual home, drmarissa.life. And while you're there, please do visit the pages. I have a nonprofit. It's called 8 Ways to Happiness. And if you shop on Amazon, you can help me out. You don't have to buy anything. If you go and shop and go to Smile Amazon and put in your designated nonprofit, 8 Ways to Happiness, then every time you shop on Amazon, I get a little bit, and that goes to the nonprofit that helps kids, teens, and young adults who have temporarily forgotten their birthright to happiness. So thanks for helping me out there. Also, when you purchase from my shop, if you purchase the 21-day fast from complaining, $21. If you stop complaining for 21 days, I double your money. But if you don't, that money goes to the nonprofit, as well as my children's book called Mommy, What Are Feelings? Great holiday gift idea for you. And you get a download, you can print, and your kids can color their feelings. Every feeling has a taste, touch, sight, and sound. And of course, you can get my #1 best-selling book in audiobook or hard copy, where I sign it for you, 8 Ways to Happiness from wherever you are. #1 on Amazon in Christian self-help category. Surprise, surprise, for a spiritual person. That was kind of funny. And then #4 in Denver Post. And then all the categories, success, happiness, 4 book medals. So I'm very proud of this baby. And I want you to, I didn't write it as a psychologist telling you how to be happy. I wrote it as one of the 7 out of 10 of us who have had childhood trauma. So if you fall into that category of the majority and you're still dragging around your past pain, like, and singing the blame and shame and pain song, then this is the book for you. It has exercises in it. And because I'm doing the commercial, the first 8 people to go to drmarissa.life and get their happy tip sheet also get an audiobook copy of this book. It's the hard copy is a great gift idea as well. All right. So that's about me. And why do I want to do all this? Because I'm on a happy 88 mission. 88 million more happy people in the next 8 years. That's why I'm alive. That's why I've had childhood trauma. That's why I had a very expensive divorce. Why is divorce expensive? Because it's worth it. Just kidding. That's why chapter 4 is out of hatred into forgiveness. I lost millions in that little excursion, but I have no regrets in my life because everything happens for my divine good and your divine good. And that's why I want you to be happy. I want you to claim your birthright to be happy 88% of the time. And I also want you to help me and Jane Elliott and all of those who have dedicated their lives to eradicating racism, especially from America. I know it's elsewhere, but this is our home. This is our country. This is a country where we say there's equal opportunity, where we say that we don't discriminate, when we say that we value everybody, when the Constitution says that we value everybody, but in reality, we don't. And so it is part of my Happy 88 mission to point out areas of darkness when it comes to valuing diversity so that we can make the shift, do the work that's necessary, and learn from teachers like Jane Elliott. So for the rest of this hour, we're going to hear more from Jane Elliott and how we eradicate racism. Enjoy.
I thought, good Lord, where did she learn that? I know where she learned that. She learned that from the significant adults in her environment, and I'm one of them. She learned her racism from me. She learned how to be a racist from me. And then Alan Moss, blue-eyed Alan Moss, in the back row stuff and said, Debbie, you know she doesn't have, Debbie, if she didn't have those blue eyes, she'd be the principal or the superintendent. They're both brown-eyed. And I thought, there it is again.
Wow.
He's defending me, not as his teacher, but as a member of his race. This is insane. What's going on here?
Right.
And
So
all of a sudden I realized what's going on here. What's going on here is racism that has been learned pre-birth, and we continue to teach it until after you're dead. I was absolutely amazed at what happened in my classroom that year. I had taken all the courses about what expectations. I know that if you expect more from a child, you'll get more from a child. I knew nothing. On that day, when those brown-eyed kids were on the top in that exercise, that I had 4 dyslexic boys, brown-eyed boys in my classroom that year. On the day they were on the top, those brown-eyed boys read words I knew they couldn't read, and they spelled words I knew they couldn't spell.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, Billy Thompson, brown-eyed Billy Thompson, came up to my desk and said, Miss Elliott, where's my spelling paper? I said, what do you want it for, Billy? He said, I want to take it home and show it to my mother. She thinks I can't spell, and I can. And at that point, he was crying, and so was I, because he didn't know until April 5th of his 3rd grade year that he could spell. Wow. And I didn't know that he could either, because he had been living down to my expectations of him. And I based my expectations of him on the kinds of things that his previous teachers said about him and his older brother and his father. In the teacher's lounge of the Riceville Elementary School, I was just shocked, amazed, and ashamed, absolutely ashamed.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I had in my classroom that year a little blue-eyed Carol, the Lutheran minister's daughter, came into my classroom in February reading at the 6th grade level. For a 3rd grader, that's pretty high level. She was absolutely brilliant. She hadn't multiplied before. I taught her how to multiply the first 15 minutes of math class. She never made a mistake in multiplication again until the day she had the wrong color eyes. Wow. And on that day, that brilliant, tall, blonde, pale face, gorgeous little so-called perfect example of the American girl made mistakes in reading, made mistakes in spelling. She forgot how to multiply. She came in from recess crying, and I said, what's going on here? As she walked across the playground, 2 brown-eyed Debbies and a brown-eyed Cindy stepped up behind her. One of them reached up, struck her across the back with her forearm, and when Carol turned around, Debbie said to her, now you have to apologize to me for getting in my way, because I'm better than you are. Wow. And Carol apologized and came into the room crying. Make no mistake about this. That would not have happened if I had not introduced racism based on eye color into my classroom. And the kinds of confrontations that you see between so-called white people and people of other color groups in this country would never have happened if we, so-called white people who are really just lighter skinned black people, faded blacks is what we are, if we had not invented racism, we would not have the problems we have in this country today. What you invent, what you create, you can destroy. We could destroy racism in 2 generations if we chose to, but we choose not to because it's a moneymaker. Now, I didn't really realize how ugly this was until I went down to the teacher's lounge at noon. I needed some support. I needed to tell the other 2 third grade teachers what was happening so that they could give me some assurance that I wasn't completely crazy.
Right.
I walked into the teacher's lounge. There were a number of teachers in the lounge, including those 2 third grade teachers, one of whom was about 52 at the time, the other was over 60. I told them what was happening in my classroom the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. When I had finished talking, one of the younger of the 2 looked up at me and said, I don't know how you have time for all that extra stuff. It's all I can do to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, she hadn't taught reading, writing, and arithmetic yet. She might as well have done the extra stuff. The other one said, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. She looked at the group and then she looked at me and said, I don't know why you're doing that. I thought it was about time somebody shot that son of a bitch. And she didn't say SOB. She said, yeah, she said the whole thing. Nobody gasped. Nobody frowned. Nobody said, Helen, God is love. These are all good Christian women.
Wow.
Nobody said, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Nobody said to her, in so much as ye have done it unto one of these, my brethren, so have ye done it unto me. Not one of those teachers expressed any dissatisfaction with what she was saying. Every one of them either laughed or smiled and nodded because she had expressed their feelings perfectly. And as the most senior member of the group, she had the most right to do so. I went back to my classroom determined that no student of any age, no person of any age will ever leave my presence with that kind of attitude intact. I will confront them immediately, and it will not be pretty, and it will not be pleasant, and I will not accuse them of unconscious bias, and I won't accuse them of microaggression. I will accuse them of being blatant, ignorant racists. Now, racists aren't stupid. You can't fix stupid. They're ignorant, and you fix that with education. And at that moment, I decided that I was going to educate these students so that they would never make a statement like that again, and never tolerate, never put up with having somebody talk like that around them. And that's what I did. I went to at the end of the day, I sent the kids home. They were glad to leave. They had never been glad to leave my room before. In fact, several times they would say, couldn't we stay overnight? We could stay here tonight. We could sleep on the floor. This would be great. No, I said, no, we're going home. But that night, they were glad to go home and glad to get out of there. I went to my mother's hotel and told her what was happening in my classroom. She said, Jane, you better be careful. You don't want to end up where Aunt Eunice did. I said, where'd Aunt Eunice end up? She ended up in a mental institution because what I was describing sounded insane. Because what we do in this society on a daily basis about skin color is insane. It makes no sense. It is irrational. It is based on a lie. It is not based on a myth. It is based on a lie.
Right.
We had some unpleasant experiences that weekend. And then Monday, I dreaded going back to school because I had heard these little third grade boys say how they were going to get even those brown-eyed kids. When the blue-eyed kids got on time, we're getting even with those brownies. So I thought, oh, this is going to be ugly. So I walked into the classroom, reversed the exercise, put blue-eyed people on top, brown-eyed people on the bottom. And the strangest, most wonderful thing happened. My blue-eyed students were much less vicious to the brown-eyed students than the brown-eyed student had been to them.
Interesting.
I didn't know whether it was because they had learned something. I didn't know whether they were just their friends and they didn't want to do it. I don't know whether they had talked it over with their parents during the evening and decided it wasn't a good idea. I don't know, but they were much less vicious than the brown-eyed students had been to them. So on Tuesday, before we discussed the exercise at all, every child had to write a 4-paragraph composition telling who Martin Luther King Jr. is, how the child felt on Friday, how the child felt on Monday, and what discrimination is. When they had finished reading, we got in the magic circle, and what you say in the magic circle is acceptable, and we'll deal with it. So I said to that group, you blue-eyed kids said you were going to get even with the brownies when you got on top. Why didn't you get even with them? And those kids almost once again in a chorus said, because I found out how it feels to be treated that way, and I didn't want to make anybody feel the way I felt the day I was on the bottom. Now, people who are pale faces, what we call white, and we aren't, because there's no such thing. Faded black folks, which is what you might refer to pale faces, because we all came from the same ancestors back there 300,000 to 500,000 years ago, and they were black. The only reason some of us have light skin is because those black people moved farther and farther from the equator so that they were exposed to less and less sunlight, so their bodies produced less and less melanin, so their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. But their brains didn't get larger and their brains didn't get smaller. So get over it. And I have here a mask, which I should be wearing and which I sometimes do when I go to town. See what it says?
Get over it.
Get over it. Get over it. Get over this ignorance. It's time to get over it. I was absolutely astounded at what those kids said during that little moment.
Yeah.
I learned more that day and the 2 days of that exercise than I ever learned before, and stuff that I will never forget as long as I live.
Absolutely. And if you've just tuned in and you're wondering who this very indirect person is, sarcasm is another service.
That's it.
This is the wonderful Jane Elliot, a teacher extraordinaire who has spent much of her life battling and trying to re-educate people when it comes to racism. You're tuned in to Take My Advice. I'm not using it. Get Happy with Dr. Marissa. Every Tuesday at Naturally High Noon, a show about hope and happiness. And today it is my birthday show, and Jane Elliot is here, zooming in from Iowa to talk about how now let's just go to the get over it, because sometimes people say get over it to Black people who say, well, we were slaves and we came to this country against our will, and so it's not fair. And I've heard white people say, get over it. Like that was then, I don't own slaves, so we're moving on. This is the 21st century, get over it. So speak to that. The whole, Black Lives Matter.
That's what I want. That's what I want to do, is I want white people to get over it. The first time I did this exercise, I did it with third graders. They called me and asked me to do the Johnny Carson show because there was an article in the paper about it. I went in and did the Johnny Carson show. Then, because of that, the local Rotarians asked me to come and speak to the Rotary. And then I did the exercise with adults. Adults, get over it. Some of the people who went through that exercise for an hour and a half, and they were only in the exercise for half an hour, at a Rotary Club meeting. These were all the wheels in town. These are the important white males. Nothing but white males in that community. I put them through the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise. Some of them never got over it. Some of them, there was one older man who would see me on the street later, and if he was walking toward me and saw me, he'd turn around and cross the street just as fast as he could. Later, he was in a motorized wheelchair. He would turn his wheelchair around as fast as he could and almost get away from me as fast as he possibly could. My husband was invited. He became a member of an organization in that community, and we were invited to a card party so that all the members could meet us. And if they were introducing the men as they came in to me, and when this older man came toward the table, I said, I know you. He said, I know you too. I've never forgotten you, and I've never forgiven you, and I never will either. I said, what did I do? What's going on here? He said, I'm blue-eyed. I said, and you're a Rotarian. He said, yes, I am. I've never forgotten that. I'll never forget it. And I'll never be in the same room with you. And he charged away. And all those members were going, whoa, what's going on here? You see, 20 years before that, I put him through the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise. He never got over it.
And isn't it
White
interesting?
Folks, get over it.
But isn't it interesting that Blacks who have gone through a lifetime of this kind of discrimination are told to get over it, and white people who have gone through a half an hour of an exercise can't get over it?
She is brilliant. She is one of a kind, wonderful. She's strong. She's a great role model for me. She just tells it like it is and doesn't apologize. So when it comes to ending racism, that definitely is the attitude. If you'd like to listen to her entire interview, please go to my YouTube, free subscribe there. We did most of it today because I think it's important that you get the message, but please do feel free to go and get that interview and listen to it again. Again, go to YouTube, get the Frontline PBS special called A Class Divided. It's brilliant, especially the end of it where they replicated the experiment in Oprah, my honorable moniker, Oprah's studio, in the TV studio. And so that was unbelievable too. I'll never forget the one line where at the end, a white woman said, well, everyone experiences some discrimination somewhere. And a Black woman looked at her kindly and said, I'm sorry, but when you wake up in the morning and look in the mirror, you don't see a Black face. You don't see a Black woman. And being a Black woman in America, you are discriminated against in a way that you will never understand. She didn't say exactly that, but I remember it hit me like that. And it was so powerful. And I'll end with this little diversity tip that I use when I do valuing diversity in corporations, which is the worst possible thing you can say to a person of color is, I know how you feel. Because you absolutely do not know how anyone feels, but especially people of color who have different treatment, they do studies that show that when a person walks into an elevator, when it's a Black man, people, including women, will step back in a way that they don't do when a white man walks in, or when you have a Black man walk by your car, that people will lock their cars in front of people. How demoralizing is that? And they've done this with, experimenting with Black men who are lawyers and doctors and professionals. They can be in suits. They don't have to look even. It's just because of the color of their skin. And so this is the kind of discrimination that is alive and well. We saw it in Capitol Hill. We saw it in, where was that? In Oklahoma. We saw it. We see it. We see it every day. Now we're seeing it in Beverly Hills, which is the story that led me to deal with this again. And we will continue to deal with this. This is not angry rhetoric against white people. This is asking, especially white people, to really understand that this is an issue and that we can't just be aware of it. Now we have to take the actions. So parents, go to your school system, get that map. It's available at Jane Elliott's website. Talk to your kids about profiling. Talk to your kids about how the history. I just can't wait. And I love when my big brother, Michael Bernard Beckwith, said this one day at Agape, is I can't wait for the day when we go to the museum, when we take our kids and we see things like, the Rodney King, and we see George Floyd and all of that. And it's so incomprehensible that would have happened, that our great grandkids will say, are you kidding me? That's impossible. How could that have happened? I am so waiting for that day. I don't think I'll see it in my generation, not my daughter's generation, but maybe their grandkids. And I pray for that day when we absolutely can't believe that we used to discriminate by skin color the way that we did and still do. All right. That's it for today's plea on valuing diversity and doing all of our parts to, in a loving way. And again, I'm not against, and again, I said it was the last thing I was going to say. Here's the last thing I'm going to say. We can still fight racism without making it an angry fight. We can still value diversity and come at it from the light place. So let's not use this as an excuse to use the same hate that was given to us and flash it back. I want Martin Luther King's way, not the Black Panther way. I want nonviolent change. I ran into the amazing Reverend Larson. I remember the words of Joe Louis. I remember Dr. King's words. We can make changes in nonviolence, but still standing ground against racism. All right. And that's it for show number 564. Consecutive shows in 9 consecutive years, in 383 consecutive weeks of Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA. It is Dr. Marissa reporting live from my living room during the pandemic, reminding you that it is all about balance. Peace in, peace out, world peace through inner peace. And remember, have the best day ever.